Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our militarized equipment ad hoc. It is April 24th. The two things that we have to discuss tonight are the explosive training bulletin on explosive breaching, as well as the impact report, as well as our newest draft of the annual report that we got a little bit earlier today. Really just actually about within the last 2 hours for me, and then last 10 minutes for everyone else. But why don't we start with explosive breaching, and let's see if we can put a pin on that today. Lieutenant Toribio.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Let me pull up the training bulletin first, and then we'll get to the impact report. So give me 1 sec while I share my screen. Okay, it says I should be sharing, so.
It's up.
All right, perfect. So I'll go over some notes that were made by Ms. Tu, and then if anybody else has any input, either on the comment or on anything else, we can go over it. So one of the comments that was made was to change this sentence here. And sorry, I know that it comes up with that little window when I highlight stuff. So this sentence prior and whereas before it would read, may become necessary for the TAC operations team to execute an entry in a hostile environment. The recommended wording is may become necessary for the team to execute an urgent entry. I'm okay with that phrasing. If anybody has anything to comment on that, happy to hear it. Okay, the next recommended change says an immediate and positive breach is but one key to a successful tactical mission designed to reduce the chances of a violent encounter, and it was recommended that it change to an immediate and positive breach is but one key to a successful tactical mission designed to reduce the violence of the encounter. I'm okay with the change. I think maybe I read it differently. I guess the reasoning behind the change, I don't quite fall in line with the belief that the presence of military equipment makes the incident inherently violent. I do think that the presence of some military equipment abates violence in certain respects, but I understand, I think, what this is saying. I don't think it fundamentally, at least for me, changes what this sentence is supposed to mean. I'm okay with the change, and I don't know if anybody has any comments on it.
Is the word choice that, well, I can see the comment there actually. So is it that the encounter that brings rise to the need of military equipment is inherently violent, and that's how we got to this point, or is it the military equipment that is the violence aspect of it?
I mean, for me, I feel like if so explosive, backing up a little bit, explosive breaching is only present when the tactical team is present, and that is going to be an inherently charged presence. But I think if the lieutenant is fine with the word change, then maybe we can accept the word change and keep moving, just because we have so much to do today.
That's also true. That's also true.
Any comment? I'm okay with this. I think that the sentence implies that there can be violence, and that a breach is something, an explosive breach is something that can be done in the furtherance of reducing it. I'm fine with however folks want to read into it, because I think the end result is that it ultimately can help to abate it. So I'm cool with it if everybody else is here. Okay.
And just a quick note, anywhere it says suggested, it is literally a suggestion. I'll speak up
Sure.
if something I care.
No. I understand. And I think that I think if it's if it's helping with the spirit of getting across what we want to get across, or if it phrases something better, or if it doesn't fundamentally change something that is going to create something that we maybe fundamentally disagree with, I'm fine with those changes. Okay. Next, effective breaching techniques reduce damage inside and outside the target, allowing team personnel to stack closer to the charge, thereby increasing the speed of response and provide maximum safety to both officers and civilians. And then it was recommended to just change that to all present. So I can accept that if that's okay by everybody.
Is it just all present or all present, comma, both officers and
No,
civilians?
I think this was the addition that I would just need to erase. Miss Two, is that correct? So this would be gone and it would be to all present. Is that what your recommendation was?
I am fine with either all present or all present, both officers and civilians.
Yeah,
Do
okay.
all present then.
All present. I agree.
Shorter the better.
Mm-hmm. And so this was a comment because the initial course for becoming a tactical or explosive breacher, presently the one by FET USA is approved. There wasn't any mention in the impact report. I just made a comment here that impact report was updated, and we'll get it in the review of the impact report after this one. Here, there was a question to resolve ambiguity as to where the annual refresher training would come, and this is done in-house. So I included that to remove that ambiguity. And I think there might be a couple more. Changed here from a person, and I just changed it to subjects. This is, I think I was thinking of just verbiage that we use elsewhere, like armed unresponsive subjects. So I just changed it to subjects. And then there was a question of stronghold and what that meant. I don't believe there's a definition anywhere. And as to the question of, crouching person behind a car, would it be considered stronghold? Or I think something else here was, would it be worth giving examples? I think it's inherent in through the document that the explosive breaching is used to actually breach an area that is contained, that there's no access. I just didn't feel it needed further definition or to remove or to further clarify that it doesn't include somebody who's behind a car. That would, to me, indicate that it's open. Perhaps we don't have an angle based on the danger of exposing ourselves to the backside of a car, but I think it's pretty clear in the document that the explosive breaching is meant for a contained area, and there's a medium that needs to be defeated in order to gain access to an area controlled by the subject. So I think I'm okay with this verbiage as is here. Any further thoughts? No? Okay.
I think that when you get to training on this subject, it's going to be where you're going to be teaching people what a stronghold position is probably through training and describing and seeing the situations that come up. Would that be fair to say?
It would be. Again, I also think it's maybe just implied that if a breach is required, it's presumed it's an area without free access, particularly when we mention one of the conditions of explosive breaching is that other forms of breaching are impractical or have been exhausted. Okay, I think that may be it for the training bulletin. And that is any final things. And if not, I'll approve everything. I'll resolve the comments and I'll send it to everybody for having, so they can have a clear copy. Okay. So let me pull up the impact report so I can show the change that I made regarding the class. And I think there were a couple other, maybe one other comment. Okay. There was a comment regarding this statement that says that the yearly costs is unknown, and that it should be stated that what's going to be done in order to kind of determine what the future costs are going to be. So I added this text here, and I'll just read it. At this time, annual costs are unknown. It's expected that the team leaders facilitating explosive breaching training will forecast upcoming costs for subsequent impact reports to include external explosive breaching classes and costs for materials for in-house training. And then I added this, which lists the actual present cost of the FET course. Ms. Tu?
This is great. Thank you for adding this. Can you also add the number of hours the FET course costs?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When people go take this course, I assume that they are on duty.
Yes.
Okay.
So let me see if I can add this on the fly.
And so 9-day course means 9 8-hour days.
Yeah.
And is that 9 continuous days?
I don't believe so. And I think that may vary depending on when and where they host the class.
So like these are officers who are generally on or have some additional assignment already, whether it's patrol or whatever assignment it is. So it's not an additional hourly or daily cost above and beyond unless they do it on overtime, right?
So they wouldn't have the course on overtime, but they may need, depending on their assignment, have their regular assignment filled on backfill. So I just added this sentence here. So depending on their assignment, course attendees may need their assignment backfilled. So let's say that I'm going to go attend the course and I work patrol. That's a necessary assignment. They're going to need to backfill my spot because I'm taking a beat, etc. If I'm working in, for example, investigations where it's not a required daily filled spot in that sense, that's because I'm not required to respond to calls for service, etc., then they generally don't backfill that. So I just added this line that says, depending on assignment, course attendees may need their assignment backfilled. And I think that was it. Ms. Tu, is there any other comments? I don't think there were.
I don't think I had many. Maybe we can just do a quick skim through and see.
Yeah, let me go through here. Here we go. I must have missed this one. So sorry, I'm reading this on the fly now. That this has been since 2008. It's a long track record.
Yeah, no worries. I just thought it might be helpful for people to know that it's not just the last few years. It's a pretty extended track record.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll just append that to the end of this.
Credit for all of that time.
Okay, I mentioned that since 08. And I think we're towards the end of the document. I'll just scroll back up to see if I missed any of your other comments. As I'm scrolling, folks, anybody have anything? Okay. Is it possible to clarify that target means the entry and does not mean a person? Yeah. So the comment was that target be clarified to mean the actual thing that's going to be explosively breached. How does severity of the crime change the construction? I think it the variable here may lend to the consideration of the charge. If it, because typically in I wish Cardona was here, but here's my understanding. I'm pretty sure I'm spot on this. They typically, and by typically I mean always, they do the calculation and they always go under. They always go under because it's just I think it's just an added measure of safety. But I think depending on what the situation might be, influenced by the severity of the crime, they may inch closer towards what the calculated value is. So it's just a factor in the consideration of the construction of the charge. At no point though is it like, oh well, this is a really bad crime, so we're just going to go over because we need to make sure this goes. It's like that's never a case. But it's a consideration when making the calculation as to how close to the recommended value we go, because they're always going under.
So let me ask what exact the implications of that. We're already talking about like crimes that are a little bit more serious or bear situations that might be a little bit more serious. So I'll talk about, let's say, a shooting versus a homicide versus like, I don't know, a mass shooter, perhaps. In say the shooting, which may be a little bit more serious on that spectrum, you would go under, or you might go under, because the possibility of a failed breach might be less bad. Is that sort of where we're, and then for, let's say, something that's a little bit more imminent and a little bit more dangerous, the mass shooter, you want to be closer to the recommended value to make sure that you definitely get through the medium. Is that what it is?
However, as I'm thinking through this, because it also involves like a natural disaster, right? Where maybe the number of people that are trapped or the length of time that they've been trapped is also going to be a factor. So I don't think it's only severity of the crime. I think what it's going more towards is like the overall severity of the situation. So this could stand to be rewarded if we're looking to be more inclusive to what else we'd be breaching for. And again, I think it maybe even be covered under this nature and type of mission, right? Like what the nature can be a pretty broad term to identify what it is we're dealing with. I'm okay even taking this out if it is adding kind of ambiguity or questions that don't really, I don't think are super significant, because I don't think this adds too much looking at the entirety of the sentence. Does anybody feel that if I removed severity of the crime that it would impact this at all? Because I don't think it does, looking at the full sentence.
I'm going to mainly look at the department for the answer to that question.
Yeah, Jeff or Bill, do you guys think it's impact? I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it. I think you can take it out.
Okay.
My sense is that what we're looking at is the imminent risk to people into life generally,
Yes.
right? And so the severity of the crime might be a factor in that, but is kind of covered in, as you mentioned, the
agree.
nature and type of mission.
Yeah. I'm gonna remove that.
And I suppose then you might want to add in the last clause there, and the probable risk to public officers, suspect, and other civilians or other people.
Maybe from suspect to involved persons.
How does that read, guys? Or subjects, all involved subjects. Maybe I'm getting too nitpicky here.
I think persons is fine. I think you lose the last comma. Do you lose the last comma?
Okay. Got it. Yeah. That was a superfluous comma. Okay. Sorry, I missed two. I didn't realize that I'd missed some comments here.
No, no worries.
This was covered. And I think that may have been it. Sorry. Anything further here? In terms of this copy that you guys will be receiving from me, would you like me to like approve all the changes and send you guys a clean copy, or do you guys still want to review the changes? What works best at this point?
I'm going to suggest, but open for discussion, that it just be approved changes, mainly because we're not working off a prior draft. Oh, sorry, we are working off a prior draft, but there has been no prior version of this prior to this ad hoc. So that there isn't, in my mind, a need to compare versions to what previously existed. Thoughts?
I would concur.
Okay, fine by me. I'll go ahead and tonight after the meeting, I'll get this stuff approved, send you guys clean copies of both, and we'll go from there. Appreciate Ms. Two.
Oh, sorry. I just noticed one more comment that I don't know if we want to look at. And it was in the impact report of whether it would be helpful to add in the section on mitigations that training includes practicing when not to do a explosive breach.
Okay. So I don't know why this thing is
Assuming that that's what is part of training.
Yeah, we always include an element of when we're exercising something, training something. There's like for flashbangs, for example, there'll always be scenarios that we incorporate where we're prepped for to deploy a flashbang, and then upon further analysis or something that changes in the scenario, you call the bang off, or you get ready to deploy some chemical munitions, and then information changes, or like, hey, no go, don't deploy. That was here in mitigations, you said?
Right. Maybe a little bit further down. There it is.
Right here.
And then there was one more note I wanted to flag.
So I changed it. I just modified this last sentence, talking about training scenarios, include completing performance objectives under time and physical stress, and involve critical thinking and problem analysis, including canceling a planned explosive breach. And then was there one more that I missed?
Oh, one more question. What if, is there any training for before you even plan the explosive breach of, and you get a training scenario and the right answer is to say, you have to tell the commanding officer, no, we're not going to do a breach.
So this is, I'm just trying to think of the totality of what you're asking. Is this like, you're saying the commander is saying, hey, breach? And then I think what we, I don't know if that is specifically done where we're having a commander say breach, but we're giving them a problem. And then the team is determining, hey, you know what, this actually isn't a breach situation. So we're not going to do it. Yeah.
Right. And then just real quick, up a little bit further under impact, in impact on persons, if it's possible to just make a note of what kind of immediate assistance or resources are offered to people who are impacted by the explosive breach. Specifically, I'm thinking about if someone's front door doesn't close or lock anymore.
You're talking about in terms of the property or in terms of, I was thinking having medical stay, maybe you mean both.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that of both the physical, immediate physical impact on a person and also their situational impact of if they are no longer able to secure their home, or if there's been damage, what resources they have immediately available.
So this is not a place where you need to explain what policy is as much as the fact that there are these impacts on persons,
Got it.
right? Because this is the impacts portion.
Okay.
I think you can just to, save a disjointed line down below.
Got it. Okay, so I mentioned here that medical personnel are staged whenever explosive breaching is anticipated. In the event injuries are sustained, and that the city courtyard is made available to assist with securing residences damaged by explosive breaches. All right. I'll save this guy and get it to you guys after the meeting.
Can I just follow up on not the past thought, but the second to last thought that in discussion? We wrote into this policy that in the situation where an incident commander says, assess or do the explosive breach,
Mm-hmm.
And the explosive breacher analyzes the situation and says, no, we shouldn't do this explosive breach. What I imagine after that decision, there is probably a discussion, and the incident commander either says, okay, yes, or gives the direct order to do the explosive breach anyways. What training is there for that? Or how do you train on that? Or even just having I don't know, their wherewithal to actually bring it up to an incident commander,
I
which is,
think,
an issue with chain of command and dealing with this situation.
yeah, I think that's just in line with any other type of, or similar to being given an order in which it conflicts with another order that was given, or which an officer believes to be unlawful. And that's, if I'm not mistaken, in our I always get it, memorandum of understanding or manual of rules or something.
It's in the manual
Yeah.
of rules where it's like, if
Yeah.
it's an order that is clearly unlawful, then you either bring it up or you don't have to follow it, or something of the sort, right?
Correct.
But this feels a little different because it's sort of a per the training bulletin, the explosive breach is not safe, is not recommended, and it's a little soft, where an explosive breacher could say, no, it's not safe, no, it's not recommended, we should not do this, but the incident commander anyways says, do the explosive breach. Like, I'm not saying I'm not asking you to say what the right answer is. I'm just asking, how or what do you do to train officers for that situation, and so that they can do what they feel is right.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if that specific scenario has been run through training. Yeah, I don't know if it has, but I don't, maybe I'm not, I understand the severity of it is obviously, maybe more severe than other decisions, but I would still kind of categorize it under this, even just like sending a team inside, for example, right? Hey, you know what? All right, you guys go ahead and make entry. But there's something that the team is like, you know what? Like, we haven't exhausted all options, or, if we force this situation, it can go bad, and there's no need to force it right now. Those discussions are held even, not just between the incident commander and the team, but in line with the incident command system. There's not only the incident commander, there's a tactical commander. So that debate is going to happen between the commanders as well, because incident commander overall in charge, the tactical commander is in charge of how something is done. So, tactical commander is getting feedback from the team saying, you know what, we don't feel good doing move X, be it an explosive breach or entry, or even beanbagging a window, whatever. And that's related to the tactical commander, and then amongst those commanders. So I think there's another layer too before it gets to the officers. I don't know if that helps in the question you were asking, but
I guess what I'm getting at is, how do we get officers to say it more often when they feel like something is not right? And how do you train or instill that? And how is it done or at least how is it done within this specific context?
at least I think in the context of the tactical team, because each element are kind of the experts of their specific discipline. I don't think it becomes an issue of making the argument for or against something. It goes both ways. Like, if the team is looking like, we need to, this guy's getting more and more mad, we need to do something to try to increase communication, break out these windows, whatever. Or, what, hey, the negotiator's is doing fine, no need to start thumping this window. in terms of the dynamics and interaction of the team elements with the tactical commander and the tactical commander then going with the incident commander, there really isn't a lot of walking on eggshells when it comes to expressing an opinion for mission resolution. So I don't think it's really come up just by nature of the dynamics of how the team works.
And just to piggyback on that, like today I was working Wood Street out there, and we had some protesters get in front of a truck. And I know it's not like explosive breaching, but there's a lot of communication that goes between the incident commander, the tactical commander, and the supervisors on scene. And like in one scenario, and we try to go over every scenario there, and even one of the commanders was bringing up, okay, let's just go, give them the warning and then go make arrests. And then we still threw more situations or more scenarios out, and we actually were able to solve the situation without making arrests, and by taking another approach and having the trucks go another way. And I know it's a little simple, but and just like what Lieutenant Trebo was saying, is like there's a lot of communication that goes on these things. The decisions aren't just made by one person, even though he's the incident commander in charge of the whole incident. It's still a lot of communication. Scenarios are being run, different ways on how to enter a place, or different tactics being used.
Okay. I think I've wrung as much blood out of that stone as I can. I just am very interested in figuring out like how, maybe not even between commanders, right? But like subordinate officers, sergeants, officers, how we can get them to bring up more often when they feel like something is wrong. And whether that's through training or just through practice or whatever it may be, just wondering how it plays out here. But appreciate the thoughts. Okay. I think that wraps up explosive breaching. I think that with those edits, that training bulletin and impact report, well, I would suggest that training bulletin and impact report with these final changes might be ready for submission to the police commission for them to make a decision on whether to forward it to city council with a recommendation to approve or not. Any thoughts about that? I saw a thumbs up. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I think it's ready to go. When's the next police commission meeting?
Thursday, but we've already passed the deadline, so the earliest would be May 11th. And if not the 11th, then the 25th, I think, if my math is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 25th.
I think we're good for either date. So.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Lieutenant Herbeo, for all your work. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. No, thank you guys. I'll get this to you guys sometime after the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Let's talk about the annual report. There are many different facets to this particular discussion. Maybe we should first discuss process and how we move forward. Assuming that Lieutenant Febel has done the what I thought might have been impossible, but got a lot of the work in and all of the edits in and all the information we want in the annual report. What is it that we are going to do with the community meeting? Why don't we have a discussion about that? I think there was an update from Mr. Lindsay Poland.
Yeah, it's not the report I would like would have liked to bring you this evening. But I would like to say that just while we were looking at the explosive breaching report, both Jennifer and I were also peeking at the annual report, and I do think there's additional content that would be needed to comply with the OMC and with AB 41. So we can look at that. I think I'm not sure that it's ready to roll for a public, but we can talk about that too. The update is, I was talking with several different youth organizations in the city. I talked to the couple who were like, yeah, that sounds good. And then the one organization that would have held it down, both because they were scheduled to host a meeting that several youth groups do once a month on May 23rd, and also because they do a lot of work on police militarization issues, was very concerned about hosting a meeting at which law enforcement officers would be presenting, because the youth that they work with, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm kind of in a position where I kind of have to report something to you, which is that they were concerned that youth would be triggered, that it would be harmful to them to hear law enforcement officers justify the use of military equipment. And so we talked about it. We went back and forth two or three different times. And, I said, well, what the law requires is a community engagement meeting. It doesn't say that law enforcement has to present or justify its use. And the other piece was that particular May 23rd date is already taken. So it's already that particular date is not going to work regardless. So then there was a discussion of like, well, what if people that they work with were briefed on the annual report. Annual report gets posted. They do work with youth about, okay, let's look at what's in this. Let's go over this, and then record comments that could be shared at a meeting, whether that's at the commission or whether it's a separate meeting. And that's kind of one option on the table. Another possibility might be that youth come to the meeting and present, and the department listens, and that's it. And at this point, it is not entirely resolved, I have to say. So I'm still, as of even today, I was saying, okay, what can I report? And I don't have a further update than that.
I'm just going to recognize that I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm just going to recognize that we are in a bit of a time crunch with the local rules as well as with state law. So we do have to think about that, and frankly, think about getting it done, especially so that the department can, get it in and then get prepared for the next year's as well, or start to prepare and getting all these systems in. Vice Chair.
Yeah. So in listening to your concerns, and I saw your email earlier, and I've been thinking about this a little bit. I do feel like the recording their feedback is potentially not going to be the most useful path. It could be. It's entirely possible that that what we get out of that is something that's very helpful. I do worry that just having without having a little more sort of facilitated conversation and the ability to sort of have follow-up questions and maybe sort of a little bit of a framed discourse around this, what we're going to get is a lot of people saying the same thing on a relatively surface level. I have done a number of these things, both for the police commission and, for my day job. And I know that if you don't come prepared with specific questions about points of concern that we have already identified, if we just say, hey, what do you think about the militarization of the police force and this document that we've shown you? You're likely going to get a lot of very surface level information. And that's fine. That checks the box potentially. But I feel like we owe the people who we are asking for feedback an opportunity to provide us with more sort of thoughtful and developed answers, and more opportunity to develop those answers. And it's, it's a fine line. We're not asking them leading questions to get the answers we want, but when we hear questions, when we hear sort of responses, it would be nice to be able to say, like, I hear that. Okay, so you have X experience. Tell me more about that. Tell me the specifics about how these particular aspects of it may have affected you, or how did those things sort of, what they look like functionally in your life, as opposed to just sort of giving them free rein. And maybe the people who would be doing the recording would actually do that. It's possible. I'd love to believe that. But I also feel like those people likely haven't been working day in and day out in this, in this process, listening to what you as community members have to say around the legal ramifications and the requirements, what the department has to say around, the sort of functional aspects of these items, and cost and so forth. And so all that is to say, I think that it would be most helpful to find a way to do something that is a little more facilitated. And that doesn't have to be, I agree, having in these situations, having the police be the sort of the role of the authority and the experts is not always the best course. I think having somebody else facilitate that conversation is definitely the better option. That is, that was sort of on my mind after reading your email earlier.
There's two.
I haven't been involved in the discussions that John has been in, but when as I was listening to the feedback that he's been hearing, one thing that I was really struck by is what a special gift this ad hoc and the department is getting, because here's this organization that works specifically with the youth of Oakland, and they're offering the ability for all of us to be learning about what these youth are thinking about, what is important to them. And they're also doing the work to make sure that it's going to be that the youth are going to feel respected and heard and protected. And I think this is a really special opportunity for us to be able to hear what young people in Oakland have to say, because I just think it's a good opportunity. It might not meet what we are looking for in a community hearing, but that doesn't mean it's something that we should be passing over just because it's not what we were looking for. And so I feel like there's kind of two questions. One is how the department wants to engage with this offer, which isn't what any of us were exactly looking for, but is still a really valuable gift of feedback. And so there's the question of what the department wants to do with that, what the ad hoc wants to do with it, and then separately from that, what the department and the ad hoc wants to do around the community hearing, the community meeting that's required by law.
I just want to point out, I wasn't saying we shouldn't hear from them. I'm saying we should give them the opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation, as opposed to just saying, what do you think, without additional opportunity for follow-up questions and a deeper dive. We did this around use of force. We had a facilitated focus group with youth around use of force. It was a conversation, and we got some pretty useful information out of it, I think. I'd like to see something akin to that. That's my point. I think that just having sort of recorded video of youth, I mean, if that's all we can get, cool. I'm not saying let's not do that. But I feel like that has limited utility because potentially we're going to hear kind of a lot of the same talking points, and many of those potentially will be somewhat surface level. They could very much surprise me. I'm not sort of ruling that out, and I would love to be surprised in that respect, but that's not been my professional experience.
Mr. Lindsay Poland.
Yeah, I think you might be surprised. I guess I'm thinking it's not necessarily an either or, right? I mean, we can try to do both things. One additional piece is I think they were thinking about using the 5:10 gathering, which I think takes place around the lake, as an occasion for this, for gathering recordings. And I guess then I'm interested in what questions. So we can invite people to come to a meeting where everybody's present, right? And then there, you can have that back and forth, assuming it's not Brown acted and the format permits that. But then for recordings, maybe having some questions that are of interest to commissioners would be useful. So I'm looking at you, David, because I think maybe there's some questions that I don't know, 2 or 3 questions is like. I think you started to go at it like, okay, what has been your specific experience? That might be one starting point, that would help to ground it, right? So that it's not rhetorical. It's really more like, this is what I think. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I could go back to the sort of list of questions we used for use of force, which were very much in that vein. I think would also be really helpful for us in the circumstances here, because what we're dealing with is has been so technical and or sort of philosophical in some ways, where we're just sort of, what does this word mean? What does it mean in this context? Those kinds of things. I think it would be helpful. We could probably even just scan the transcripts of some of these ad hocs and find those things in which we have. We could probably also just use our sort of recollection, but it might also be helpful to look back and find those points of conversation where we did sort of have extended periods of conversation around very sometimes very granular pieces of information as far as these policies go, and figure out a way to make that not quite so sort of, you run the risk of it being very opaque without the context of all of the conversation we've had, but finding a way to sort of draw out the sort of the crux of the conflict, and present it to the community, and sort of like, these were our points of conflict. These are our points of concern. These are the aspects of these policies which caused us to have to put in the most thought and conversation. Those are the things I really want to hear what the community has to say. Additional to what has been your specific experience, how did you perceive that? How did you, what did that look like specifically for you? Because the reality of the situation is sometimes different than how it's perceived, and we need to take that into account, because that is part of our thought process around this, right? And all of those things. I think it's a little bit of both, but I'm all about getting. And I know this is the first year that we're doing this annual report around this stuff, and we can, there can be an iterative improvement around all of these things, and we can strive to make it have greater depth. I'm interested in having the biggest breadth of voices as possible, but I think depth here, given how long this has taken and how granular we've gotten around some of these things, will be incredibly helpful.
From the department, I assume silence is acquiescence, but I don't think that's quite right. Any thoughts, Lieutenant?
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm gonna apologize, Mr. Shea. I don't know what the definition of acquiescence is. But I will share
Consent.
this.
Consent.
John brings up a pretty good point. That obviously I never would have caught, is that the meeting is pretty open to interpretation of our participation and what we want to get out of it. And I think that all your conversation is constructive. Whatever decision is made, of course, I'll run it by Chief Allison, and who's a very reasonable individual, and I don't particularly see a right or wrong way in doing so. Hopefully we'll extract the information that everybody believe is relevant, and in the manner that takes course. I'm open-minded.
And did you already talk with Chief Allison, or you were kind of waiting maybe for a more specific proposal, or has there been any conversation with them yet?
Yeah, once the report is given the go ahead, and we have discussed and feel that we have the most adequate path forward for a community meeting, like I said, I'm happy to present your ideas to him when that occurs. Hopefully that can occur tonight.
So it occurs to me that the second aspect, the second challenge we have here is not just sort of the logistical piece, but like the scheduling. So it sounds like what we had identified as a available time does not work for at least one of the organizations that you have been in conversation with. Is that because their space is not available, their staff is not available,
It's because so
available?
they do a monthly event that's called a Coach Up, and the different youth organizations work together on it. And that particular May 23rd one is committed to another activity. So it would have to be newly scheduled thing.
And we don't think we could do it as sort of a, it sounds like was to do it as sort of to jump into a pre-existing sort of intervention or scheduled event and use that as an opportunity.
Right, because they're already collaborating, it's already scheduled. And I mean, the 510 thing, if for the recording part of it, is also already an event. There's already youth coming. So not necessarily as a, bring the commission and the department and the youth together, but as an event where youth could record some statements, and we could try to prepare that as much as possible. That seems like it's viable. But then for the community engagement piece, where the commission and the department are present, that seems like it would need some other, scheduled moment, I think.
So let me make a proposal, and feel free to tear this apart, but here are some thoughts. We should take tonight to go through this annual report as much as we can. Whatever we finish for today will likely be the police commission submission for May 11th to hit the deadline. And then we will likely have an updated after our meeting on May 8th. That will give us time to get the annual report as ready as it's going to be, to hit the 60-day deadline on the municipal code for May 11th. The department should plan to post it on its website either on the 8th or the 9th. When we come back on the 8th, I think that we should come up with a few questions. Perhaps, and it's going to be really difficult to synthesize all the work that we've done over the last year into a few questions, but perhaps a few questions that we can give to the youth organizers for May 10th, put on the website, on a survey or something to capture as much information and input as possible. Have the meeting on May 11th for the annual report to satisfy OMC, and then have the community engagement meeting on the 25th.
Can I ask, I want to be sure I understand what the proposal is. So what you're saying is the department, based on revisions that happen between now and May 8th, would post the annual report on May 8th around approximately.
After our next ME meeting.
After our next ad hoc meeting.
Right.
Okay, so the next ad hoc meeting would review whatever revisions happen, and then it would be posted right after that. And then the commission, it would be in time for the OMC deadline on May 11th.
There would be an agendized, the annual report would be agendized for the 11th. The initial packet, which needs to go in at 6 p.m. on the Monday, would likely have whatever draft comes out of today with an updated copy from what comes from May 8th.
Okay.
Yes, that
And
would
then-
satisfy OMC.
And then May 10th, whatever is possible in terms of gathering recorded testimonies, hopefully would happen. And then the commission would have it on a regularly scheduled meeting on the 25th to consider for submission to the city council.
Right, for that community engage. Well,
Or
I don't think it goes to.
that would be the community engagement meeting under 481.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because the
And a question about that,
actually, let me look at the
if
point. Let me
if it's during a regularly scheduled commission meeting, is it possible to suspend the Brown Act rules so that there can be some back and forth?
that is a discussion that I'm going to figure. That's an answer I'm going to try to figure out by May 8th.
We've done it before. So whether we were breaking the law before, I guess is, who knows? But I believe that, yes, we can, when we have done, again, this was around use of force. We did essentially a community Q&A around use of force when we did an offsite, which was just a, regular commission meeting, except that it was not at City Hall. In every other respect, it was the same boilerplate, same sort of processes around public comment and stuff, except that when we had a sort of mini town hall, we had a Q&A where we were able to suspend Brown just so that we can have that piece of it. So that is how we managed it previously.
And I should add that the people I talked with said that City Hall is fine as a location. Not an issue.
Would we be able to set the time so people don't show up at the beginning of police commission and then have to wait until agenda item 11 is called?
I got to figure out that thing with Cherry, right? Yeah, we would try to make it early because we also have closed session issues.
We could also,
Procedurally, could you do something where you like recess, go into the community meeting, which happens to be in the same place? No, because Brown Act won't let you.
I think what we could do is we could do opening quorum, and maybe push out and then just go straight into that agenda item, which is a community forum around militarized equipment. And then once that is done, then we can go to closed session. closed session doesn't have to be at the beginning of the meeting. It tends to be most effective at the beginning of the meeting for us. But I think that is, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. In fact, I think we've done that at least once before. Whether they want to do that or not, we can discuss that with the chair.
Yeah, and then under our K7 governing body is OPC, not city council. Well, it includes the city council, but it's under our definitions in K7, the police commission is the governing body. So of course, we could forward it to the city council afterwards just to make sure it receives.
So I'm a little
Widespread of
confused
attention, but,
because the policy issues that went to the city council under, for different use policies, that was based on AB 41.
No, I think it was based on OMC. Because OMC specifically says recommend to approve to city council.
Okay, if under 41 it's the governing body, it would be the only one in the state that I know of in which it's not the elected body. I think it has to be an elected body but anyway.
I mean, we could, but the elected body versus the community engagement meeting might be, well, let me just read it to be sure.
Yeah, the community engagement meeting is a different animal.
Yeah. So after May, the department should probably send it to both the police commission and the city council just to cover it.
So I'll just say, I think that's a viable proposal. And what it also says to me is that we should try and get as much done on the annual report tonight as possible. And, we've already identified some things, some questions and points, so.
Department?
Ready to roll when you are, sir.
Oh, I meant about my proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well thought out. It's I've taken notes on it. Needs to be established on our final meeting on the 8th. Establishing a website no later than the end of business on the 9th. Ensure that the city council as well as the commission have copies. May 11th, our community meeting to satisfy the OMC, and community engagement meeting on the 25th. Sounds great.
Okay. That sounds like some consensus. Okay. So homework besides let me just make sure, homework besides the homework for May 8th is to figure out some questions, some very directed questions that we can on issues or things that whoever you are may want public input on with respect to militarized equipment, how to get to those things, how to get to those answers, whether it's how has militarized equipment or how has these specific pieces of equipment helped in very drastic situations, or whether they've been harmful and in what way, and how would that change, whatever it might be. We'll be able to take the full 2 hours on May 8th on these things. Okay. Lieutenant Febble, ready to roll?
Yes, sir. Let me share my screen here.
And if I could ask if we can concentrate on the the second half, basically, of this, which really addresses the use summaries. Because the other stuff is mostly policy that was, it summarizes policy that we've already gone through.
Agreed, sir. Yes. Let me again, I apologize. I'm not a big Zoom user. But I
You do
will-
have it up though. You got that. And we see your,
winning. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so you see, okay, I took down the notes from what we've discussed, and exactly, John, just like you wanted to start. Obviously, we've want to give the community the best product available, so we did put photos in here of these items so they know exactly what they're looking at for reference. I think that's helpful, even though it wasn't necessarily required. Here's our notes from today. Okay, so let's get into it here. We continue with our geographic reference. So last time we discussed it, we just basically, as you recall, we just had the number of times it was deployed, and there was some discussion on this number, which it made sense the way we're capturing the numeric value, and then we did the breakout here on the side. So what you see is like for drones, for example, you have the total 55 deployments. And then you're going to see right here, specifically, we highlighted it to capture warrants. When it's specifically checked out for warrants. In this report, that'll obviously be much easier to rectify with Vision. And just for the group, the good news is that we did get our Vision system back online this week. And I did have a discussion with Dr. Beckman regarding the very informative discussions that we've had and some of the increased data that needs to be collected according to the law that needs to be put into Vision. So I know that's a future endeavor, but I just want to reassure this group that we're doing everything we can to build that in for the next annual report to get even more detailed data for everybody's reference. So we brought this. Yes, sir.
this too.
Would it be possible to add another column that just makes a note of the percentage of reported uses that were authorized by warrant and non-warrant forms of court authorization for the in that police area breakdown? Like, even if you don't have the answer, just making that column so that it's clear that there should be a percentage would be really great.
So, okay, so obviously we got percentage, overall percentage here, which as you can see here is like, 30%. But then you want a separate column under each one to also indicate in here by warrant. What
Oh,
percentage?
not me. The OMC wants that. So
Okay.
it's the OMC says that
so
per
percent-
geographic area, you need to have the percentage by warrant.
So essentially what it's requiring is a breakout box for number of times deployed, and then a separate breakout box if a warrant is appropriate, basically this, but for warrant, so you get a percentage. Is that what we're asking?
That
We
sounds,
can do that. It's not, I mean, it's not difficult.
that sounds right. For me personally, if you can make that another column, that will make it a little bit easier for me to read.
For each police area, the police department shall report the number of days controlled equipment was used. You got that? And what percentage of those daily reported uses were authorized by warrant and by non-warrant forms of court authorization.
Good catch. We can capture that.
What is the best way to do that? So are you suggesting that there's another column for the areas 1 through 6 that describes when? So there's two things: percentage by warrant, authorized by warrant, and then by non-warrant forms of court authorization. So warrant and then court.
Well, the good
Right.
news is I believe we have 0 citywide for court.
That
Because
helps.
court is mainly, TROs and stuff of that nature. What do you guys think if we have this 37 that goes down vertically? We have another column like Ms. Chu suggested right here, specifically for warrant, and then you'll have a percentage for non-warrant, and you have a percentage for warrant, which hopefully would add up to 100% for each given area. How's that sound?
So I think the second column would be authorized by warrant.
Mhm.
And then perhaps the third or percentage authorized by warrant. And then the third column would be percentage that were court authorized by but not by a warrant. Might be
Got it.
0.
Yep.
Yep, and it might not add up to 100 because you might have situations that don't fall into either of those situations, like Commissioner Shea just pointed out.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay. Great. All right. Yes, sir.
In general, our warrant authorized operations, they're going to be pre-planned, correct?
Yes. I mean, yeah, 90% of the time they're pre-planned.
Okay. That's what I thought.
For the the last row in each one of these boxes, could you just it says number of days controlled. Could you just put number of days controlled equipment used?
Oh, you know what? We mentioned that last meeting. I apologize that didn't
Yeah,
find its way in there. Number of days equipment used, right? That's much easier to understand.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Make sure we highlight that. Okay. Good catch. Okay, so all this is going to be usage for every piece of equipment, and we'll add those rows. Oh, and you'll see Mr. Poland and everyone. Every one of these has alternatives and mitigations for their group type. We discussed that.
Yeah, I did have a comment on that.
Yes, sir.
So when I look at the OMC, it requires a description of any alternatives that were reviewed. So not just the fact that they were reviewed, but what alternatives were reviewed. It does not make any reference to whether they were superior or not. So if, for example, the department looked at, I don't know, some alternative to using a drone in any given situation, right? Or not just in any given situation, but as a whole, right? Okay, we're thinking about using something else in order to accomplish the same purpose, which is the language of the OMC. Then that alternative should be described here. And then there's a number of data points about that alternative, fiscal cost, and so on. If the department did not consider any alternatives, then that should be noted here. Maybe the department didn't consider any alternatives, so we're like, no, we're good, right? But if it did consider any alternatives, they need to be described, and it's irrelevant whether they are considered superior or not. For the sake of the OMC.
So I do recall this point being brought up last time, and I put this information out to our respective subject matter experts, and they stated, as it states here, that they did not find any superior alternatives. Now, I would say, and this could be open for discussion to the group, it could be a tremendous weeks and weeks, months worth of work to look at non-alternatives to get that information.
If the department hasn't looked at them, it has not considered alternatives for this equipment to reach the same purpose, that's all you have to say.
Okay.
If you have considered alternatives, then the ordinance says, what were they?
Well, I'm going to be very happy to put our fixed wing aircraft in here because that's a great alternative.
I mean, if the department considered it, then and then of course it's what the annual costs would be, the potential impacts of the alternative method on welfare, safety, civil rights, and civil liberties. So annual costs presumably would be the thing that deterred you from proceeding. But for a fixed aircraft, right? But that's what the ordinance is seeking.
Understood. I'll put that information back out to our subject matter experts, as you stated, and if information comes in that stated that alternatives were considered, we will document the data of their decision outlined as you stated. All right, so let's see here. All right, so it's just we got quite a few items. Say, okay.
Right, do you mind going back up by a page or, yeah, right there. So I'm looking at the AR-15 and the usages under the following categories. Is there a summary and a purpose listed someplace else in the document?
Is there a what now?
A summary or a purpose for the uses that's listed anywhere else in this in the report?
No, I think what you're going to see is that the information, with the exception of us adding in photos, which wasn't technically required, but we thought it would be helpful based on the time element that we have and the future technology that with vision that's going to capture all of these questions for the 2023 annual report. Our goal is to capture the baseline necessary information to comport with the law. So that's what we have in here.
Yeah, the law, so it's AB 481 requires a summary of how the equipment was used and also the purpose of the use. And then OMC is just a summary. But between the two, it's the two laws are looking for summary and purpose.
So how we'll have to do that is we'll have to attach that as a attachment to the annual report based off of the Excel spreadsheet that our analyst maintains would be the most appropriate way to do that. So we'll just include that with the report.
What's going to be in that? Sorry, what's in the Excel spreadsheet?
Well, so whenever somebody utilizes a piece of military equipment, that notification goes out to obviously our commanders as required and our PIO, but also our analyst who helps capture and maintain the data. And she has her recording mechanism, which is about to be replaced with vision permanently. So she has that information where when I do a military equipment notification manually, how we've done it the entire time, there is a very brief paragraph that talks about the incident and the conditions that led to its usage for everyone. So we can combine that reference as essentially an addendum to this.
That would be excellent. That would be really excellent.
Yeah.
So specifically, just so I make sure that I want to make sure I'm not adding too much, or adding too little. Let me go to my. All right, so we need an addendum that contains a brief synopsis of the usage, right?
Right, and if it's at all possible to share this week, we can just take a quick look and confirm that it looks like you've got the purpose and summaries through that.
Okay. Oh, it's and the purpose is obviously going to be contained within the synopsis. We agree. OPD responds to armed subject, domestic violence incident, deployed emergency rescue vehicle, situation resolved. I think that contains all the necessary ingredients, correct?
It's a little hard to know without looking at them, I have to say.
Ex-
But yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, but it's
That's
In
really
your
what,
example, it sounds correct. I just don't know
well,
about
that's really
all
what
the
we
other ones.
write. That's you're not gonna find Shakespeare in these synopsises that commanders write, and they're very busy, but it's gonna, and it's just because that essentially aligns with the department directive. Is we want to know what precipitated the event, what was the purpose of the vehicle, and does that vehicle comport with the department's goals to de-escalate? it'll cover all that. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything because we got one more meeting.
If it's at all possible for you to share that like tomorrow, Wednesday.
It has to be redacted, a lot of the information. There's a lot of information I can't just put out there.
Okay.
So sensitive law enforcement, sensitive information, that's going to take time. So if I can know, so as long as I get this, so what were the exact words you were saying? So obviously it's the usage, purpose, and what was another one?
Summary.
Would you say that's synonymous with synopsis?
What the law says is a summary of how the military equipment was used and the purpose of its use.
Got it. How the equipment was used and the purpose. Yes, it will definitely capture that. That's been how we've been doing it for quite a long time. Excellent. It's good to know that we are been in line from day one. Great.
This
That's
sounds
great.
great.
Yeah, and I have a question of further about if you can go back down to the rifles.
Mhm.
Because that's the largest number in here.
Yeah, those are going to be our patrol rifles.
Right, that's what I thought. So I've seen some summaries before that are quarterly reported to the command. There we go. So when it says 337 and then there's days deployed was 100, is because I think the way that they're recorded internally, at least the way they were recorded, was one officer, one rifle is an instance of deployment. So if you have a team of 8 and they are each have patrol rifles, that is 8 deployments. Is that correct?
I believe that's how it works. Yes.
Okay. So that's what's being recorded here.
Yes, that should be correct. If on an incident there are multiple patrol rifles that are deployed, each officer logs it, and it is counted as a statistic when it's compiled.
Okay. And I noticed that here, the numbers for areas 1 to 6 don't add up to 100. They add up to 92 or 3. 92. Would the others have been outside of Oakland, or
No, it would have said outside. I'll talk with our analyst to reconcile that figure.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have a question about, I think, the vehicles when we get down to the armored vehicle. Actually, the armored vehicle is up top, isn't it?
I believe we just passed it, sir.
Yeah. I mean, and those are already posted by incident, publicly. Yeah, a little bit further up. There we go. Okay. So
You want armored or mobile command?
armored, yeah, that's further up. Here we go. So DAT, tactical and SWAT protection. Are you going to be able to do the same thing with the Excel sheet with the synopsis for this?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
This is actually the easiest one
Uh-huh.
to provide the synopsis on, because we've been obviously capturing that data from day one. It will give a brief outline, kind of like the example that I'd given. Officers respond to possibly armed subject, in the street, passed out in the vehicle for unknown reasons, responded obviously for force protection and de-escalation.
Okay. I mean, the general, I don't really know what that tactical and SWAT protection means in practice. I mean, I can imagine what they stand for, but what it actually means in practice. So I think those synopses will
The good news
be
is actually this whole thing right here, if it just can come out, because it's going to be, you're going to have the addendum, right? I mean, we could leave it in. That's the goal of it, right? But if you want to actually find out the summary, the brief summary, then you could refer to the addendum.
Okay.
I think that's a better way to do it. Have the main purposes like summarized here, but then refer to addendum for individual summaries of incidents.
Sounds good.
And for outside of area, that's outside of Oakland, I presume.
Yes, sir.
The synopsis will say in what city that was.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Gonna get to a new category here. One of the biggest challenges that we've had, and I know it's not going to come as a surprise to this group, was the financial part of it. Was essentially how it was funded. A lot of this data, when we bought a lot of this equipment, we didn't anticipate obviously tracking that methodology. Here's the search warrant usage right here. I do I was definitely tuned into this immediately, that we're going to fix that. We don't use that stuff for that. This was it turned out to be a warrant suspect who happened to be a juvenile. But any concerns here? It's going to somewhat be handled as well when we do the breakout of the second and third column that we discussed earlier, but it's here as well.
Well, so these the text under with the warrants column, that kind of refers to the type of warrant or the type of apprehension that it was. I imagine that's also going to be in the addendum and in the synopsis. That is that the case? Like for 5 of these, we're going to see that that militarized equipment was used for the apprehension of a murder suspect due to a warrant to arrest them.
Yeah, I think the one benefit that this column does have is it has the it has the aftermath. For example, I could be dispatched to a person sleeping in a vehicle with a gun, right? And that's my purpose, and I'll have the summary of that. And that would result in arrest of, say, a murder suspect via warrant or search warrant. I'm pretty sure that the military equipment addendum will capture that, but I can't say 100% sure that it would. So this captures obviously the type of folks that we're generally dealing with search warrants. These are, and again, John brought up a good point that these are over 90% of the time pre-authorized events, which is why I captured this immediately. The juvenile, that doesn't make sense, so we'll fix that data.
This too.
Is it possible to get the per area breakdown? I'm looking at firearm possession suspect, which has 9 occurrences and 4 areas. And so it's hard for me to tell if it's one of each and one of these just had 5 occurrences or anything like that.
Right. So you want to add the percentage column again, just like we did before?
If it's not too difficult, then yes, that'd be great.
I don't think it'd be too hard. And it'll look uniform like above, which is pretty good.
Yeah. And that these numbers, since they're under single digit occurrences, it might be more legible to give the number of occurrences rather than a percentage.
The percentage will also tell you the number with that low of a number too.
It's true, but some of us don't want to do that much arithmetic.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Okay, inventory. All right. Got that. And the one change you'll see here, this is what we discussed before, is this is where we were going for projected costs. And like you'll really see the biggest numbers come with ammunition. So like the federal 223. So we obviously reach out to our range experts, and they know that on average we expend X number of training, amounts of equipment. But then there are certain instances, I would not say ammunition, but say, a flashbang or something like that, we would hope annually would cost 0. We really don't want to have to use those things unless it's in training. But in times of civil unrest, they may get used. So feel free to go through this, but this is all from the professionals at the agency that are trained and deploy these, what they anticipated in terms of cost. And you'll just notice that it's really the ammunition is the one that they know for a fact. There's no question that we're going to be using, you know, a portion of that. So they know that the dyno no mill for explosive breaching, that they're going to use this stuff.
Mr. Lindsay Boland, got your hand up.
Yeah. AB 41, in terms of reporting on costs, includes training and personnel costs. And I think several departments have wrestled with this, but it is going to be, in general, the largest cost by far of this equipment, by far. And so acknowledging that this is going to be an estimate, but knowing the number of days and the number of officers who train on any given type of equipment, or spend other time on it, spend time maintaining it, spend time, you know, working with it, whatever. But that is a requirement of AB 41, and I think it is the most important piece of the fiscal cost reporting. Like trying to nail down how much a bullet costs and how many were expended in training, and therefore how many were going to be expended per year. You know, it's like that's the fine grained stuff, but the estimating of the personnel and training costs, I think, is by far the most important piece.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that makes sense. So, like for example, our Noveski sniper rifle. Okay, we know that there's mandatory training annually for the sniper rifle. We multiply that by the number of officers involved in that training, by the hours a year, and we input that number. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I'm looking for, because Alameda PD did a breakdown where they for patrol rifles, I think it was, where they figured out how many officers trained with it for how many times, and they even like broke it down by, okay, some of these are sergeants, like this, or the SWAT team officers, and what their average level of pay was. I'll actually, if I'm going to try and bring it up, and if there's a moment, I can share it with you either by email or on the screen.
No, we can break it out by sergeant. That's not a big deal. Okay.
I have a question about the firearms, the rifles. You mentioned the Novoski. Does that get cleaned after each time it's used?
Yes.
How long does it take to clean?
Well, I mean, when I clean my firearm, it takes, if I'm not being lazy, 10 minutes. So for me, 5.
What's the firearm that no one wants to clean because it takes too long?
You know, I think that's really fortunate with our modern ballistic technology, and just because we actually have our training, and Steve is a sniper. He's amazing at these things, but you know, we're so well trained in the nomenclature of these weapons that they clean pretty quick. But we'll defer to him.
Yeah, it can take depending on the level of cleaning required, and it's typically, so it's trained that every time we shoot it, we clean it, and there's time built into training for the team to clean. So that's kind of rolled into the time anyways, rolled into the training time. Now, if I go off on my own and I shoot on my own and I clean it on my own, that's not anything that is considered an expense to the department. I'm just going to get additional training, so it's kind of on my own time. I'll clean it on my own time, and it takes about anywhere from 15 to a half hour or so, depending on this is like a pistol. You can get that done pretty quickly, 15 minutes or so. And rifles can be a little longer, and depending, sniper rifles will probably be the most intensive, and maybe once a year we added an additional step to get rid of some fouling in the barrel, so that adds another couple more minutes. It's about 15 to 30 minutes or so.
Would you consider cleaning firearms part of the maintenance of that equipment?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're looking at the department doing stuff like getting the cleaning equipment. Yeah.
That
Yeah, I
is
think it's
part
a
of
good
this
point that you
report.
I think it's a good point you bring up, and also that Steve brings up, is yeah, it's definitely a cost, a maintenance cost, and the department builds in that maintenance time necessary to maintain the weapon into the training. So we will use the appropriate arithmetic to account for that in our calculation.
Jared, can I just very quickly share a screen with the Alameda PD's report on this, of their fiscal costs, their personnel costs?
Sure, Lieutenant Febel, will you surrender the screen for a sec?
Yes, sir. I'm gonna take that. I hope that worked.
It did, thank you.
So you can see they determine how many SWAT officers train, how often. Then they basically made a calculation based on the salaries and benefits of that officer. And then they also did the same thing for patrol, right? For patrol officers. And made, a distinction between ordinary officers and sergeants, and then came up with an estimate. So just wanted to, I'm happy to send that off to you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I took a photo of that, and obviously because we're close partners, I have associates at the agency as well. But I read quickly what you had shown on the screen, and that's exactly what we were planning on breaking out. So I think that's accomplishable given our. All right, I think that brings us to the bottom. Got a little conclusion. This is obviously
Lieutenant Febel, you need to reshare your screen.
yes, that would help. All right, so that brings us to the bottom. We kind of thought it would be a little something to kind of have our value statement at the bottom. If you think it's unnecessary or needed, we will happily delete it. But again, we want to provide kind of the best overarching document for the public.
No, I think that's fine. Sure document, makes sense.
So we definitely have our work cut out for us.
Miss 2?
Oh, sorry to jump in. I was wondering if we could maybe check in on when we should expect to review any draft before the next time, just because I know there's going to be a lot of changes, and especially with the addendum, I want to make sure that I'm allocating sufficient time for review.
So, well, actually, before I get to that, Mr. Lindsay Pollard, same thread or different?
Very similar thread, which is, I really appreciated this time this evening, and I'm still looking at the document, and I haven't really been able to study it. And I'm wondering whether if we can kind of agree on a space in which we will give any further feedback that we have. We can share it with the whole group. The department can respond and say, okay, we're able to do that, or we're not. Just because we just saw it for the first time, or this version for the first time tonight, and it would be great if we were able to take a little bit more time with it.
Before I turn to the department on specific questions, how much time? Like, could you get it done by Wednesday and close of business?
Is this for us, sir?
No. No, this is for commissioners and community members to review the current draft of the annual report and get revisions, suggestions, or comments to you, Lieutenant Fennell.
I think that's doable. So in the next 2 days, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So what that means is, Lieutenant, you will be receiving some emails Wednesday afternoon on some further comments, edits to the annual report outside of what you've heard today. What I would suggest is, rather than having comments, which are very much helpful, perhaps you may just want to make changes to the document in a way that perhaps you envision those changes, like perhaps that recognizing that you may not have the data to fill out those, but sentence changes, suggestions, whatever it may be, and Lieutenant Fennell will take a look at those and either incorporate or bring them back for our May 8th meeting.
I think that's a brilliant idea. That would be really helpful from the group if you could help me with that.
Yeah, and rather than having suggestions or like examples from Alameda PD, I just make changes to the document. Just make changes to the document. It may just move things going forward. Lieutenant Fennell, on the flip side, let's start with the addendum that you mentioned, the Excel spreadsheet. How long will it take to redact?
So I am hoping, so tomorrow's Tuesday, I'm hoping that we could get that done by same thing, close of business Wednesday. That'll be our the nice thing about our discussion tonight is that a lot of this information needed that we've talked about tonight can go to different sources. So I can have the analysts really focus on the redaction of that data, because that sounds like it's a core component, the final element of what we need. So I'm shooting for Wednesday, definitely this week.
And then in terms of turnaround on the draft for our May 8th meeting, recognizing that you may be working this on the weekend, do you think you can get us the next draft by May 5th close of business?
May 5th, close of business. Absolutely.
Okay. That'll give us the weekend and also give me time to send it to our chief of staff so that she can include it in the agenda for May 11th. I think that's all of the tasks, right? So questions for community members and public for our engagement meeting. Edits to the annual report by Wednesday close of business. Excel spreadsheet addendum in redacted form by Wednesday close of business. Next draft of annual report by May 5th close of business. And then May 8th to consider questions, annual report draft, and sort of make final tweaks before it gets posted on May 9th and submitted to City Council and OPC. Presentation on May 11th. We'll decide on the 8th whether to have a meeting on the 22nd. Maybe a check-in might be useful, and then May 25th for Town Hall Public Forum. Miss 2?
Thanks. Also, I'm really hoping one of us might send out all of these dates afterwards. For the addendum that we'll be receiving close of business Wednesday, is there a date we want to give feedback on by?
So the Lieutenant Feb. All right. So let me first say that the addendum is sounds like a amalgamation of all of the military equipment notifications. The copy that we're going to get is a redacted version. It is an internal police document, so let's recognize that for a sec while we're going over it and making decisions about whether or not it might be sufficient or prove useful for the addendum on this particular piece. With that, the feedback that you are seeking to give on it, what is that feedback? Whether it's going to make the cut, whether it, what
Right.
is that?
Right, whether we have any questions about if it complies with state law on the requirements for providing a summary and purpose. Because we talked earlier about how the examples that Lieutenant Febble was bringing sound like they will fulfill it, but it's hard to tell without seeing all of them whether they would fulfill the state law requirements.
I definitely think that they will. Because the good news is commanders are writing them, and they obviously have a higher standard. As these literally get pushed to the chief of police, it's never a fun thing to embarrass yourself on a doctrine. But Ms. Tu, if you see something that you believe is glaring, please do bring it to my and everybody's attention so we can remedy it quickly.
So I am going to do what I usually do, which is hope for the best but plan for the worst, which is in the
I'm not excited to be reviewing a giant spreadsheet, but I also want to prepare for the worst.
in the event that it is, in your view, not sufficient, how long will it take to get feedback? And I need to balance that with how long it might take for the department, if they choose to agree with that feedback, to figure out a solution.
What would have to happen is if for some reason there was a feeling that the synopsis was inadequate, it would require us to have to go back and mine every single report. That's weeks, possibly months of work.
That's why I'm balanced. That's why I'm thinking about how much that balance is going to be.
But I genuinely am confident that the synopsis that we provide in our MEUs does provide scope and purpose as stated.
I usually want to prepare for edge cases, but I'm very much not excited to prepare for this edge case. And so I'm kind of leaning towards Lieutenant Febble's really wanting to just go with his gut on how this might turn out.
Why don't I just decide then on May 1st or May 3rd? Always do it this way. Votes for May 1st to return on feedback on the addendum.
May
That's
1st sounds great for me.
That's Monday of next week, correct?
It is. So assuming Wednesday, get it close of business Wednesday, that's Thursday, Friday, 2 business days, 3 business days, or 5 calendar days.
To be honest, I feel fairly confident also, but I'm more interested in the space in which community members can ask questions about what's in that sheet. I think that might be the most fruitful conversation. So yeah, of course, if there's something that seems like it doesn't say anything about purpose at all, then we can point it out. I think May 1st is fine.
But I'm also totally open to the 3rd. The 3rd actually probably is a little easier because the 1st is May Day technically. It's going to be kind of an all hands on deck for OPD.
Oh, yeah. All right, May 3rd. Well, sorry, May 1st is not for you, for the department to do anything. May 1st is the deadline for feedback on the Excel spreadsheet. So you won't be getting it until May 2nd or dealing with it until May 2nd.
Hey, that sounds great. Earlier the better.
I hopefully have remembered everything accurately and will summarize everything for an email out to you all. All right, 8 p.m. look forward to May 8th.
And no public comment from our very loyal public member. Yes, she can raise her hand if she does.
She may be trying to wrap her brain around this like I am.
I see Q&A. She says, I'm good. Thanks for being here, Miss Beck.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for a great meeting.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to see you.
Night.
Good night.
She got real good.